Welcome, mystery lovers. Before we dive into today's gripping tale, I have a special challenge for you. Hidden within this story is a secret keyword that holds the key to understanding everything. Starting from Chapter 4, I'll drop subtle clues throughout the narrative. Your mission? Find that keyword and drop it in the comments below. Can you solve the mystery within the mystery? Let's see who among you has the sharpest detective skills. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more thrilling stories. Now, let's begin our journey into deception and truth. The autumn rain hammered against the windows of Holloway Farm in Pine Ridge, Oregon. Sheriff Tom Mitchell stood in the dimly lit study, staring at the lifeless body of Robert Holloway slumped over his mahogany desk. Papers were scattered everywhere, and a half-empty glass of whiskey sat near his cold hand. The 911 call had come from Daniel, the eldest son, at 10:47 p.m. By the time Mitchell arrived, both brothers were present, but their stories couldn't have been more different. Daniel Holloway, 35, stood rigid by the fireplace, his suit still crisp despite the late hour. His face was pale, his jaw clenched. "I found him like this when I arrived for our weekly business meeting," he stated firmly. "Michael was here earlier. They argued violently. I heard it over the phone when Dad called me, concerned about Michael's debts." Michael Holloway, 29, sat on the leather couch, his hands trembling. His flannel shirt was wrinkled, his eyes red. "That's a lie," he shouted. "I wasn't anywhere near here tonight. Daniel's been hiding something about Dad's business dealings. He had everything to lose if Dad exposed the truth." Sheriff Mitchell looked between them, sensing the deep chasm that had formed. Two brothers, two versions, but only one truth. As he examined the scene more carefully, he noticed something odd. A photograph, face down on the floor, partially hidden under the desk. Before he could reach it, Daniel quickly stepped forward. "Sheriff, we should seal the room." But why was Daniel so eager to control the scene? And why did Michael's hands bear fresh scratches? The Holloway family had been the backbone of Pine Ridge for 3 generations. Robert Holloway inherited the 500-acre farm from his father, transforming it from a simple cattle ranch into a thriving agricultural business with contracts across the Pacific Northwest. He raised Daniel and Michael alone after their mother, Elizabeth, died in a car accident when the boys were just 10 and 4 years old. Daniel had always been the responsible one. He earned a business degree from Oregon State University and returned to help his father manage the farm's finances. He wore suits to the barn, kept meticulous records, and planned every detail of their expansion. The community respected him, saw him as Robert's natural successor. Michael took a different path. He traveled after high school, worked odd jobs from Seattle to San Francisco, and only returned to Pine Ridge 2 years ago. He preferred jeans and old trucks to boardrooms. While Daniel managed spreadsheets, Michael rode horses across the property and talked about turning part of the land into an eco-tourism venture. Robert had been surprisingly supportive of Michael's ideas lately, which created tension Daniel tried to hide. Investigator Sarah Chen arrived from Portland the next morning. A former FBI analyst now working privately, she specialized in cases where family dynamics complicated the truth. As she walked through the farmhouse, she studied the photographs on the walls. Young Daniel in his graduation cap, Michael on a mountain trail, both boys with their father at various ages. But she noticed something peculiar. In every recent photo, the brothers stood on opposite sides of Robert, never next to each other. "They used to be inseparable," whispered Martha Green, the housekeeper who'd worked for the family for 20 years. "Until about 6 months ago, something changed. They stopped talking, stopped sharing meals. Mr. Robert was heartbroken about it. What happened 6 months ago that tore these brothers apart? And did that event lead to Robert's death?" Sarah Chen sat across from Daniel in the formal dining room. He'd agreed to recount the entire evening, minute by minute. His version was precise, almost rehearsed. "I was at my office in town until 8:30 p.m., Daniel began, his fingers interlaced on the table. "Dad called me at 8:45. He sounded distressed. He said Michael had shown up unexpectedly, demanding money. Dad told me they were arguing about Michael's gambling debts. I could hear Michael shouting in the background, saying Dad had always favored me, that he deserved his share of everything now." Daniel paused, his composure cracking slightly. "Dad asked me to come over, to help mediate. I told him I'd be there in 20 minutes. When I arrived at 10:45, the front door was open. I called out but heard nothing. I found Dad in his study, collapsed over the desk. I immediately checked for a pulse, found none, and called 911. Michael showed up 5 minutes later, acting shocked, but I know he'd been here earlier. Sarah took notes, watching Daniel's body language. Did you touch anything else in the room? Only Dad, to check if he was alive. And I picked up his phone from the floor to see if he'd called anyone else. What about the photograph under the desk? Daniel's eyes flickered. I didn't see any photograph. Sarah leaned forward. Daniel, your father's phone records show he called you at 8:45. Yes, but the call lasted only 14 seconds, hardly enough time for the detailed conversation you described. The records also show another call at 9:30 to a number we're still tracing. Daniel's confident demeanor began to crumble. Maybe I'm remembering wrong. The shock. But Sarah saw something else in his eyes. Not confusion. Calculation. There's something you're not telling me about that night, isn't there, Daniel? His silence spoke volumes. And outside, thunder rolled across the darkening sky. Michael's version of events painted an entirely different picture. Sarah met him at the old barn where he'd been staying since the incident, refusing to enter the main house where his brother remained. I was in Bend that entire evening, Michael insisted, pacing like a caged animal. I drove there after lunch to meet with investors for my tourism project. I have receipts, witnesses at the restaurant. I didn't get back to Pine Ridge until 10:50 p.m. When I pulled up to the house, I saw Daniel's car already there and the lights on. That's when I knew something was wrong. Sarah studied him carefully. Why did you immediately assume something was wrong? Michael stopped pacing. Because Daniel and Dad had been at odds lately. Daniel wanted to sell the farm to a development company. Dad refused. They'd been fighting about it for months. Daniel stood to make millions from that deal, but only if Dad was out of the picture. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth, Michael said, his voice breaking. Dad told me everything 3 weeks ago. He said he couldn't rely on Daniel anymore, that he'd changed. Dad wanted me to take over the farm to keep it in the family the right way. Daniel found out, and I think he couldn't accept losing control. Sarah made a mental note. Both brothers accused each other of financial motives. Michael, I need to ask you directly. Can you prove you were in Bend? Yes. I kept everything because I knew Daniel would try to frame me. As Michael pulled out his phone to show evidence, Sarah noticed something. His story about maintaining the farm and family values seemed genuine, built on a foundation of mutual respect with his father. But there was an edge of desperation in his voice, as if he needed her to have confidence in him. Michael, those scratches on your hands, how did you get them? He looked down, surprised. From fixing fence wire yesterday morning. You can ask Jorge, our farmhand. He was with me. But when Sarah checked later, Jorge had the day off yesterday. Another lie? Or just a confused memory? Sarah's investigation took her deeper into the Holloway family's recent history. At the Pine Ridge Community Bank, manager Helen Torres revealed something that changed everything. Both brothers had been meeting with me separately over the past few months. Helen confided in her private office. Daniel wanted to discuss liquidating assets for the development deal. Michael wanted to secure a loan against his inheritance to fund his tourism venture. Neither knew the other was making financial plans. What about Robert? Mr. Holloway came in 6 weeks ago. He wanted to change his will. He was frustrated, said he couldn't put his faith in either son anymore. They were both pressuring him in different directions, and he felt caught in the middle. This revelation troubled Sarah. Both brothers had financial pressure. Both had potential motives. But someone was lying about that night. At the sheriff's office, forensic reports arrived. Robert Holloway died from a heart attack, but the medical examiner noted something unusual. Elevated levels of stress hormones suggested he'd experienced extreme anxiety in his final hours. Additionally, there were no signs of physical violence, but his medication for blood pressure was missing from his desk drawer where he always kept it. Sarah returned to the farmhouse study, now sealed with police tape. She examined every detail again. The scattered papers were contracts, financial statements, and correspondence about the development deal. But underneath the desk, she found what she was looking for. The photograph Daniel had tried to hide. It showed 3 people, not 2. Robert and his sons, yes, but standing with them was a woman Sarah didn't recognize. Written on the back, "The Truth About Margaret, 1998. Who was Margaret? And why would Daniel want to hide this photo? Sarah's phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Stop investigating. Trust no one in that family. Your confidence will be betrayed." Someone was watching her, and they wanted her to stop. But Sarah Chen had never walked away from the truth. Sarah discovered that Martha Green, the housekeeper, had been keeping Robert's private journals. "He asked me to hide them 6 months ago," Martha explained nervously. "Said if anything happened to him, someone honest should read them." The journals revealed Robert's inner turmoil. Entry after entry detailed his growing concern about both sons. But one entry from 5 months ago stood out. "I learned today that Daniel has been secretly negotiating with Cascade Development without my approval. He forged my signature on preliminary documents. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He said he was protecting our future, that I was too sentimental about this land. I don't know my own son anymore. Can I still have confidence in him?" Another entry from 3 months ago. "Michael came to me with his business plan. It's actually brilliant, but he needs capital. I wanted to support him, but when I checked his financial records, I found he'd been gambling heavily in Portland. He lied about where the money went. He begged me to believe in him, to give him another chance. I want to, but how can I build trust when he keeps deceiving me?" The most disturbing entry was from the week before Robert's death. "I found Mother's letters in the attic. The truth about Margaret changes everything. The boys need to know they have a half-sister. She deserves her share of the inheritance. But how do I tell them after hiding this for 30 years? Daniel will see her as a threat to his plans. Michael will feel betrayed that I kept secrets. I'm meeting with my lawyer tomorrow to make things right." Sarah's heart raced. A half-sister? This changed everything about the motive and the lies. She contacted the lawyer, James Wu, who confirmed Robert had scheduled an appointment to revise his will to include Margaret Holloway Chen, a daughter from a brief relationship before he married Elizabeth. Margaret lived in Seattle, worked as a nurse, and had no idea about her inheritance until Robert reached out to her 2 weeks before his death. Sarah needed to speak with Margaret immediately, but as she left the lawyer's office, she noticed a black SUV following her. Someone didn't want her connecting these pieces. The question was, which brother knew about Margaret, and would they kill to keep their inheritance intact? Margaret Holloway Chen sat in Sarah's hotel room, tears streaming down her face. At 42, she bore a striking resemblance to the woman in the old photograph, Robert's first love, also named Margaret. "My mother told me about Robert on her deathbed last year," Margaret explained. "She said he never knew about me, that she left Oregon before she realized she was pregnant. But 3 weeks ago, Robert called me. He'd hired an investigator and found me. He said he wanted to make things right, that I deserved to know my brothers and share in the family legacy." "Did you tell anyone about this?" Sarah asked. "No. Robert asked me to keep it quiet until he could tell Daniel and Michael properly. He planned to introduce us all at Thanksgiving. He said he wanted to rebuild trust in the family, to show his sons that honesty was more important than money." Sarah showed Margaret the photograph. "This is your mother with Robert and the boys. It was hidden in Robert's study." Margaret gasped. "Where did you find this?" "Under Robert's desk. Someone wanted it hidden." "Margaret, I need you to think carefully. Did Robert mention anything about his sons' reactions if they found out about you?" Margaret nodded slowly. "He said Daniel had already discovered some financial discrepancies and was asking questions. Robert was worried Daniel might have found the investigator's report about me and Michael. Robert said Michael had been acting strange, asking about family secrets and old documents in the attic." Suddenly, everything clicked into place for Sarah. Both brothers knew. Both had discovered Margaret's existence before Robert's death. Both had reasons to fear losing their inheritance. But there was something else, something Sarah was missing. Her phone rang. Sheriff Mitchell's voice was urgent. "Sarah, we found Robert's blood pressure medication. It was in Michael's barn, hidden in a toolbox, and we have security footage from town showing Daniel's car near the farm at 9:15 p.m., not 10:45 like he claimed." Both brothers had lied about that night. Both had physical evidence against them. But Sarah realized the real question wasn't who killed Robert. It was who was protecting whom and why. As she ended the call, she heard a sound outside her hotel room. Someone was listening. Sarah called both brothers to the farmhouse for a final confrontation. Sheriff Mitchell stood by as Daniel and Michael entered the study together for the first time since their father's death. Margaret waited in the adjacent room, watching through the doorway. "You both lied," Sarah began firmly. "Daniel, you were at the farm at 9:15 p.m., not 10:45. Michael, your alibi in Bend is fabricated. Your car's GPS shows you returned to Pine Ridge by 8 p.m. And you both knew about Margaret." Daniel's face went white. Michael slumped into a chair. "But here's what really happened," Sarah continued. "Neither of you killed your father. Robert had a heart attack, triggered by stress and the fact that someone hid his blood pressure medication. The question is who and why were you both covering for each other?" Daniel finally spoke, his voice cracking. "Because we both made terrible mistakes that night. I came early because Dad called me, furious that I'd forged documents. We argued. I said things I regret. He clutched his chest and I panicked. Instead of calling 911 immediately, I searched for his medication, wasted precious minutes. When I found it missing, I realized Michael had been there earlier." Michael stood up, tears flowing. "I took the medication that afternoon. Not to hurt Dad, but because I was angry about Margaret. I wanted to scare him, make him see he couldn't just bring a stranger into our family. I planned to return it, but I forgot. When I came back that night and saw Daniel's car, I knew something was wrong. I found Dad dying and Daniel trying to help him. We both realized our actions contributed to his death." "So you created false stories to protect each other?" Sarah asked. "We blamed each other publicly," Daniel admitted, "because we couldn't face the truth, that our lies, our selfishness, our lack of faith in Dad's love destroyed him. We couldn't admit we both failed him." Margaret entered the room. Both brothers turned, seeing their half-sister for the first time. The resemblance to their grandmother was unmistakable. "Dad wanted us to be a family," Margaret said softly. "He believed we could learn to trust each other. Can we honor that wish?" In that moment, the brothers realized the truth. The real inheritance wasn't the land or money. It was the chance to rebuild what they'd broken, to restore confidence in each other and in themselves. Daniel looked at Michael, then at Margaret. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quietly, "but I want to try." Michael nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "We both do." But Sarah held up her hand. "There's still one piece missing. Someone sent me a threatening text warning me to stop investigating. Someone has been following me. If you two were protecting each other, who else knew the truth about that night?" The room fell silent. Outside, the sound of an approaching car broke the tension. The front door opened, and Martha Green entered, her face pale and drawn. In her hand, she held an old wooden box. Sheriff Mitchell instinctively moved toward her, but she raised her other hand in a gesture of surrender. "It was me," Martha said, her voice trembling. "I sent those messages. I followed you, Miss Chen, but not because I'm guilty of murder, because I'm guilty of loving this family too much." She set the box on Robert's desk and opened it, revealing bundles of letters, photographs, and a legal document. "I've worked for the Holloways for 20 years. I watched these boys grow up after Elizabeth died. I was there for every milestone, every heartbreak. When Robert told me he'd found Margaret and planned to change his will, I was terrified." "Terrified of what?" Sarah asked gently. "That this family would tear itself apart," Martha explained, tears flowing freely. "I'd seen how Daniel and Michael had already drifted away from each other over the past months. Adding a third heir, a stranger, felt like it would destroy everything. So I took Robert's medication that afternoon. Not to kill him, never to kill him, but to force a health scare that would make him reconsider his plans." Michael stood abruptly. "You took the medication? Not me?" Martha looked at him with confusion. "You?" "No. I took it from his desk at 3 p.m., hours before either of you arrived." Daniel's face showed a mix of relief and horror. "Then the medication I couldn't find was already gone," Martha finished. "When Robert called you, Daniel, panicking about chest pains, I realized what I'd done. I tried to return it, but you were already on your way. By the time I got back to the house, Michael had arrived, then you, Daniel. I heard you both arguing about who was responsible, and I stayed hidden. I let you blame each other because I couldn't face what I'd done." Sarah stepped forward. "Martha, Robert's death was ruled natural causes, a heart attack brought on by stress. Even with his medication, there's no guarantee he would have survived. The medical examiner confirmed his heart condition was severe. But I contributed to it, Martha sobbed. My interference, my lack of faith in Robert's judgment, my inability to trust that this family could handle the truth. It all played a part. Margaret approached Martha slowly. You were trying to protect them. I understand that. My own mother kept me from this family for 40 years, thinking she was protecting everyone. But secrets and lies only create more pain. Sheriff Mitchell cleared his throat. Martha Green, I have to take you in for questioning. What you did, regardless of intent, was serious. As Martha was led away, she turned back to the brothers. I'm sorry. Your father wanted you to have confidence in each other and in his love. He believed you could be a real family again. Please don't let my mistake destroy that chance. The door closed, leaving Daniel, Michael, Margaret, and Sarah in heavy silence. After everything, the lies, the accusations, the hidden truths, they finally understood what Robert had been trying to teach them all along. 3 months later, the autumn leaves were falling again at Holloway Farm. Sarah Chen returned to Pine Ridge, not as an investigator this time, but as a guest. The transformation was remarkable. Daniel had withdrawn the development deal, choosing instead to honor his father's legacy. Michael's ecotourism project was moving forward, with Daniel's business expertise helping to make it viable, and Margaret had relocated from Seattle, accepting a position at Pine Ridge Medical Center while getting to know her brothers. The 3 siblings had spent countless hours together, reading their father's journals, sharing memories, and slowly building the trust that had been shattered. It wasn't easy. Old wounds don't heal overnight, but they were committed to trying. Martha had been charged with tampering and reckless endangerment, but received a suspended sentence due to her age, her lack of criminal intent, and the family's testimony on her behalf. She no longer worked at the farm, but the siblings visited her weekly at her small apartment in town, bringing groceries and staying for tea. Dad used to say that confidence isn't given, it's built, Daniel told Sarah as they walked through the property. One honest moment at a time, one kept promise at a time. We're building it now, brick by brick. Michael joined them, Margaret at his side. We're starting a foundation in Dad's name, he explained, to help families in crisis learn to communicate better, to rebuild trust when it's been broken. We figure if we can turn our tragedy into something that helps others, maybe Dad's death won't have been completely in vain. Margaret smiled softly. He would have liked that. He spent his whole life building this farm. But what he really wanted to build was a family that could weather any storm together. Sarah felt a warmth in her chest. This case had taught her something profound. The truth isn't always about who's guilty or innocent. Sometimes it's about understanding how good people make terrible choices when they lose faith in each other, and how healing begins when they find the courage to trust again. As the sun set over the Oregon hills, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold, the Holloway siblings stood together, truly together, for the first time in their lives. They'd found what their father had always wanted them to have, each other. The great truth that Robert Holloway wanted his family to rediscover is at the heart of this mystery. Were you able to deduce what that central value was? Hint, check the pinned comments right now. We've already dropped the first 3 letters of the hidden keyword. See if you can complete the word. Drop your answer in the comments below and let me know at which chapter you found the main clue. If you enjoyed this mystery and Robert's journey, smash that like button and share this video with fellow puzzle lovers. To make sure you don't miss the next thrilling story, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. What did you think of the final twist? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, keep questioning everything.